My least favorite one recently and the most annoying one, Miss Tilly, is the one that
Press one
says,
now.
press one now. Press one. You know that lady that says, oh my goodness, the telemarketers, and now they're using robocalls to just exploit us further. Are we having loopholes? Why are we still having companies that are still exploiting us so much?
I think I'm not sure if I'd call them loopholes, but there's
Mm,
definitely a disagreement. And we, as the regulator, are of the view that direct marketing calls on a phone are covered by our Act. And the people who do direct marketing, and it may not surprise you, but they feel that they are not covered by the Act and that they can engage
mm.
in indirect marketing. And I'm not sure where it'll end up.
Welcome to In Conversation with Portia, the African Echo podcast. We are today talking about data protection, digital rights and governance, which is an issue that's really become increasingly critical in our everyday lives. We're not just looking into where we are today, but we're also just reflecting on how far as the country have come in a democratic era and how has data governance evolved. We're joined by Alison Tilley. She is the commissioner at the Information Regulator. Miss Tilley, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the podcast today.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
Miss Tilly, South Africa is currently, we have been and we are still celebrating 30 years of democracy, which is very a substantial years. And when we look at the data governance, digital rights, what have been the early challenges, especially post 1995, and how has the landscape changed since then?
Well, I think one of the things that we're very aware of is this question of what's been called the digital divide.
Mm,
And really the access to information and data that people have. I think things have changed considerably over that time. I mean, smartphones are now, well, even possible. They weren't there 30 years ago.
mm,
But even though we may have smartphones that are now more accessible, you still have to buy data, and data is still very expensive.
mm,
So I think we've made some progress. One of the things the regulator's in charge of is trying to make sure that we have better access to information.
mhm,
So our job is, once you have your smart device and your data and you need information from a public or private body, you should be able to just request that and they send it to you. And it's part of our job to try and make sure that that happens. And I think we're seeing it is happening more and more, but I think we still have quite a long way to go on that.
My goodness, it sounds like so much to do in your shoulders there. While you have been established in 2016, however, the job itself started at least 5 or 3 years back. That's a lot that have, I do know the term, and I'm sure South Africans will know the term papaya and so forth. However, it will be just a matter of understanding what exactly means on the day-to-day lives. Now, with that being said, do you think we took too long to regulate data protection, considering how fast? I'm a digital fanatic, and the way I have to catch up every day, Miss Ellison, you will never understand. Did we really take that long for our laws to come into play?
Well, I'm afraid that Poppy itself, really, the legislative process started in around 1997
Mm,
in relation to the regulation of access to information and privacy, and our legislation, the Poppy legislation, came in 2013. There was quite a long period of time of just sort of trying to set up systems.
mm,
So then only in 2021 when our act came into operation. So it's been a long time coming, but it's been part of a package of laws. So we've had Poppy, we've
right.
had the Access to Information Act, we've had whistleblowing. So there's been a number of laws that were sort of packaged together,
Mm,
and that's really the time period. And I think, even then, we sit down now with different issues that come up in Poppy, and we still don't necessarily know the answers because we haven't really seen a systems test of the whole act. There have been some sections in
Right.
Poppy that we've thought about much more in Pyre have gone to court because Pyre is obviously much older.
Mm.
That's been around for 25 years. But so we're still learning, even now, even after all this time,
Mm.
and trying to figure out exactly, how this applies to every single situation.
Situation. And also I'm taking this into consideration every time when you talk to a South African in any language, they're always worried about the transparency of that form because we have been exploited as South Africans, not just data-wise, in all aspects. And especially now data is something that is not tangible.
There
Yeah.
is no question that transparency does result in embarrassment. But the Act specifically does not say that you can keep something secret because it will embarrass you if it's made public. That's not a good reason. There are a lot of other reasons that we allow. National security is one, commercial secrets would be another one, information relating to prisons, for example. We don't publish the plan of the prison for very obvious and good reasons. So
Mm.
we do make sure, I think, that there are good reasons not to disclose information. We make sure those are followed.
Mm.
But on the other hand, if your reason is really that just it's going to be embarrassing and awkward, well, that's not really good enough in an open and democratic society, which our constitution insists that we are. So there we are, and that will mean in some cases transparency where perhaps people don't really want that, so don't necessarily want to see that.
Miss Tilly, yo, I have so many questions for you, but I'm also excited to have you today. Let's move to now the digital rights in the democratic era. There's been a rise of digital activism, social justice movements, using data. And in your words, do you think South Africans fully understand their digital rights, especially in democracy, within democracy context?
I think we're very smart about our online lives.
Mm.
And I think the all the right questions people are asking about that. They want to know about how their own information is protected.
Mm.
They're very aware that that information can be abused
Mm.
by people who provide services. I think people are also very smart about using information for making their lives better.
Mm.
And it's whether it's something like signing up for a school or finding out when the chemist is open. These things are all, I guess we take them for granted now,
Right.
but we didn't have that 15 or 20 years ago. And we do make our lives easier. I think it still worries the cost of data is the thing that really worries me. We shouldn't be making choices. I mean, we shouldn't be having to choose between data and food.
Mm.
Straight
Mm.
up. That's not a choice anybody living in our community should ever have to make. But it's expensive. And, if you need to get a call about a job or, you need to access a website to upload a CV, those are choices that you end up making. And I think that that's one of the things that we really do have to address,
Mm.
is really working on bringing down the cost of data. I mean, things like SIM cards. I mean, we have more SIM cards than we have people.
Mm.
We're not short on SIM cards. We're ideally we would want more people to have smartphones, but I think that number has been rising steadily,
Yeah.
and is going in the right direction. So some things are looking good, and I think we are making really good use
Mm.
of the services that we have. We're pretty switched on, I think, when it comes to the digital world and what it does for us.
Miss Tilly, on social media, you find the so-called experts that are issuing warnings that there are certain companies or institutions that are monitoring conversation. Sometimes this might be a warning, but it does cause some panic. That comes with so many other elements that have to do with the use of unsolicited data and so many aspects. I mean, yeah, with the rise of digital media and the rise of using of smartphones, and also we're not forgetting that South Africa still has a lot of people that are residing in rural areas who are unable to get all the information that might be known to a person that is in the urban areas. So while we are very happy about that, but there's still a lot needs to be done, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. I think that one of the things that I would say is that we shouldn't ask people as individuals,
Mm,
or perhaps let me say it slightly differently. We shouldn't place the responsibility on individuals to protect themselves
mm,
in the cybersphere.
mm,
Yes, you can take steps. There are things you can do, you know, fair enough. But really, it's the service providers that have to make sure that the internet is safe. And
mm,
if you walk out into the street, cars drive on the left. They don't exceed certain speed limits in certain areas. There are road markings, and people obey the road markings
mm,
most of the time. We accept that when we go out into the road, that we do have to look left and right and make sure that there's nobody coming when we cross the road. But we also understand that cars aren't going to drive up a road the wrong way. We so it's a sort of collaborative thing. We need
mm,
we need the service providers who are out there on the digital superhighway
mm,
to make sure that they are abiding by the rules. And we need to cooperate, and we need to do the right thing as well. But we can't say that it's for us
mm,
to make sure that we are safe and nobody else, because I think that's not fair. It doesn't put the burden on the service providers who are often making pretty substantial amounts of money
mm,
out of this environment and all the exciting things that are happening, in the digital space. So I really think we have to work, and this is part of the regulator's work, is to make sure that things like privacy policies
mm,
are fit for purpose and do the right job and are fair. It's not fair that people in Europe have better privacy than we do in South Africa because of the difference in the way, social media providers
mm,
set up their policies. So there's some stuff that I think we can do, which is it's quite straightforward in some
mm,
ways, and really make sure that there are protections for people,
mm.
um, and so that they are, it's not just them having to keep themselves safe.
Mhm. My least favorite one recently and the most annoying one, Miss Tilly, is the one that says, press one now. Press one. You know that lady that says, oh my goodness, but why?
Yep.
Why do we have to go through that? I mean, we have all these beautiful laws that the telemarketers, and now they're using robocalls to just exploit us further. And I'm thinking back to my days when I was still a student and I was working at a call center. I had to leave the job, Miss Tilly, because it really didn't feel well in my spirit to just sell cell phones that where we had to market in a certain way. But when I'm looking at the cell phone, it's not exactly the one that I'm telling this customer. And the data that we usually get that when we had so much fun was from the elderly people, which was a blatant misuse.
Mm,
So
mm,
when I
mm,
get
mm.
this call again, I feel the same way. Like, why do we still get the lady who tells us to press one now? What if a person press one and then the information, where does it go? And there's so many things that goes in my mind. Are we having loopholes? Why are we still having companies that are still
Mm.
exploiting us so much?
I think I'm not sure if I'd call them loopholes, but there's
Mm,
definitely a disagreement, and
right.
and we, as the regulator, are of the view that direct marketing calls
Mm.
on a phone are covered by our Act.
Okay.
And the the people who do direct marketing, and it may not surprise you, but they feel that they are not covered by the Act and that they can engage
Mm.
in indirect marketing. And I'm not sure where it'll end up. It'll almost without doubt end up in a court, I guess, because unless, unless one of us agrees with the other,
Mm.
and I don't think we're going to change our minds. So it really means that we'll have to find some way of resolving that. But yeah, it's our view that people who use direct marketing and use the phone
Mm.
are covered by POPI, and they're actually not allowed to do that unless they have your consent,
Mm.
or unless it's necessary as part of some agreement, for example. So, you don't always absolutely have to have direct consent, but I think the time is coming where that will shake down, and then we'll probably see a court rule on it.
Mm. Absolutely. Now, this one is a fun one, and it's a recent one. Political elections. I mean, the elections in South Africa. This is going to be huge, and I think that's my personal thinking. Like you are going to have your hands full with this one. Now we want it to become
Mm.
digital, and are we going to be safe, Miss Till? I think I'm asking the question that is in everybody's heads right now. I mean, help us out, please.
Well, I think one of the things we have seen in the last election was really not as many calls from political parties,
Hmm.
um, and so I think that was noticeable that the number of calls went down.
Ah.
We've had a various engagements with the IEC and uh, around the issues of elections and whether people are processing information in a way which is unlawful from our point of view. And I think that we're reaching an understanding with them and with the parties that, it's not that political parties can't use personal information. They can. They have access to the voters' rolls,
Right.
precisely because parties do need to be able to reach out to potential voters, but it also has to be done in a way that's consistent with the Act. And particularly in relation to social media, it has to be done in such a way that isn't exploiting vulnerable vulnerable people.
Mm.
So I think we've come away along on the issues. It's obviously going to be next year as we'll be looking at local government, and the same issues will come up again.
Mhm.
And I think it's one of those things that every election cycle we're going to get into the discussion and hopefully make sure that everybody understands better and better as we go along what is acceptable and what is not,
Yes, yeah.
and then be able to act against those people who are acting wrongly.
With the digital elections that are probably looming or they're still proposed for now, how is that
Mm.
going to work for us?
I have not had a proper discussion on this issue, and we haven't discussed it internally in the regulator.
Right.
I'm old school. I like voting with a piece of paper and a pencil,
Mhm.
and I make my cross
Mm.
and I put it in the box. We've seen other jurisdictions really crash and burn
Mm.
with digital systems for voting, and some of it is really not, it's nobody's fault. It's just, the system was set up badly. I think in the last uh, election, we had some questions about, the handheld devices that the ICT was using and whether those were running properly.
Mm.
If you have a problem with the digital system, it's becomes very much a systemic problem. Whereas if you run out of pencils, it's, somebody can pop down to the shop and buy some more.
Mm.
It's really, it's on a level that's more easily fixed, and particularly in a country like we are, where we don't have an IT specialist living on every block. I'm not sure that anybody does, maybe the Estonians, but it's certainly a situation where digital voting is, yeah, I think it's definitely up for debate. It probably sounds easier,
Mm,
it sounds simpler, but I think they're given our vulnerability to cyber attacks and
mm,
our difficulties with cybersecurity,
mm,
it may be somewhere that we really don't want to go, but we'll see.
mm. Talking about cybersecurity, Ms. Tilly, just this morning I was listening to the public broadcaster. The gentleman came live on air. He lost almost a R500,000 simply because there was a
Mm,
mistake with how the personal information was stored. Now they're trying to get the money back into him. It's a challenge. Maybe just to check for a person who had probably some challenges as well. Have you won such cases? How many of them have you championed? Is it
mm. So the regulator has quite a narrow jurisdiction when it comes to cybercrime, and the bit that we're really responsible for is if there's been a data breach.
Mhm,
We're responsible for making sure that the whoever sustained the breach can report to us, and that we can then help them with fixing the problem.
mhm,
Sometimes that's can be fixed by simply telling people that there's been a data breach and
mhm,
to go and change their passwords, for example. That's one possibility. But we've also had other situations where there's been not necessarily, I'm not sure that I can think of an example where money has gone missing and we've been able to get it back.
Thanks for this response, Ms. Tilly. As we are wrapping up, I'd like to ask you two final questions. The first one is about the lessons that South Africa's 30 years democracy can now teach the rest of the African continent about data governance. And also, second one is we look ahead to another 30 years to come. What role should the data play in strengthening the democracy in our country?
So if we look at the lessons, South Africans' 30 years of democracy can be of value to the rest of Africa in terms of data protection. I think that we have come away in terms of practical implementation of data protection, and I think we've really started to learn about what various provisions in our law means. And I think that we should really share those learnings with our colleagues across Africa. I think we have a range of data protection authorities doing great work. And, I think it would be very useful to share lessons learned. We're looking at a meeting of the African data protection authorities in Nigeria in May, and that will be an opportunity to do that. If we look at the role of data and data protection in strengthening democracy, we know, and certainly from recent events in America, that privacy it turns out to be a very important right that needs to be defended. And it really is important that only the right people have access to personal information and they process it in the right way, and then they destroy it when they don't need it anymore. It's pretty straightforward, but obviously the devil's in the detail and really implementing that on the ground. But I think that as with all of the rights that we have in the Constitution, privacy is an important one in establishing, the rights of people to privacy, and to be able to have, as they classically define privacy, to have the right to be left alone, which is one of my favorite definitions. And I think that's really what we can look forward to in the future. Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting us to come and talk about our favorite issues. and we're very happy to come back and answer questions and talk about these issues some more. They're so important. Thanks.
What an insightful conversation. Alison, thank you so much. That was Alison Tilley. She is the Commissioner at the Information Regulator of South Africa. Such final important thoughts and advices for you, our listeners. Thank you so much. And that is it for today's episode of In Conversation with Portia, the African Echo. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation on our social media pages. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered. I am certain next time we are together, I will have less flu and much brighter voice. Goodbye.
A special thank you to GCIS for their support in sourcing our incredible guest for this episode. Your commitment is truly appreciated.